Water is the one thing in nature that keeps its intentions completely hidden. A mountain looks like a mountain, a storm looks like a storm. You can watch it stack up black on the horizon, and you know to get inside. But a river at rest tells you nothing. A dry creek bed tells you less. The water that kills you almost never falls on your head. It falls on somebody else's 10 or 15 miles upstream, on ground you can't see, and then it comes looking for the lowest place in the landscape, and the lowest place in the landscape is usually where we built the house. That is the strange thing about a flood. Every other disaster gives you something to look at. The flood gives you a calm afternoon, a slow green current at knee height, a canyon full of light, and then it gives you about 4 minutes. We have built our country on the assumption that we would hear it coming, that the sirens would sound, the phone would buzz, the sky would at least have the decency to be dark overhead. But flooding is the second deadliest weather hazard in the United States after extreme heat, and the deadliest kind of flooding by far is the kind that arrives fast. Nationwide, roughly 7 out of 10 flood deaths happen in flash floods. The word flash is doing all the work in that sentence. Today we are counting down 11 states where the next mega flood could arrive without warning, ranked not simply by how much rain falls, but by the size of the gap between how safe the place feels on an ordinary day and how quickly and how completely that can change. Some of these states you would guess. The one at number 1 is the largest uncounted flood risk in America, a catastrophe that scientists say has already happened many times and is, statistically, overdue. Before we start, if you like the kind of thing that makes you look twice at ground you thought you understood, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel. And I want to know one thing while you're here. What's the nearest river, creek, or wash to where you're sitting right now? Drop it in the comments. You might be surprised how many of us live closer to moving water than we think. Let's get into the list. Number 11, Arizona. We begin in the last place most people would picture drowning. Arizona is a state defined by its dryness, and that dryness is exactly what makes it lethal. When rain finally comes during the summer monsoon, from roughly July through September, it lands on sun-baked ground that cannot absorb it and rock that will not hold it, and it runs. It gathers in the dry washes and slot canyons that thread the desert, channels that are bone dry 300 days a year that people walk through, park in, and camp beside without a second thought. The horror of an Arizona flash flood is that the sky above you can be perfectly clear. On August 12, 1997, 11 hikers were killed in Lower Antelope Canyon near Page. Almost no rain fell at the canyon itself. A thunderstorm some 15 miles upstream dumped its water into the drainage above the slot, and that water funneled into a corridor barely wide enough for a person's shoulders and came through as a wall. There was no cloud overhead to warn them. There was no time to climb. That is the Arizona pattern, and it repeats across the state every summer. A road dip, a wash crossing, a scenic canyon, filled in seconds by a storm nobody standing there could see. 6 inches of moving water is enough to take a person off their feet. Number 11 is the desert that drowns you on a sunny day, with water that fell on someone else. Number 10, Colorado. Colorado sells you the same trick with a different backdrop. Here the danger lives in the canyons of the Front Range, where the Rockies meet the plains and steep, narrow, rock-walled valleys act like funnels. On a clear summer evening, these canyons are the picture of a mountain vacation. Cabins, campgrounds, a shallow river you can wade across. On July 31st, 1976, the eve of Colorado's centennial celebration, a thunderstorm parked itself over the Big Thompson Canyon and refused to move. It dropped between 12 and 14 inches of rain in about 4 hours, roughly 7.5 of those inches in a single hour, over steep terrain with thin soil and nowhere to put it. A wall of water more than 20 feet high raced down the canyon at around 15 miles an hour. It killed 144 people, making it the deadliest natural disaster in Colorado's history. Many of the victims were in the lower canyon, where scarcely any rain fell, and they never understood what was bearing down on them until it arrived. A flash flood warning was issued around 11 that night, hours after the water was already killing people, because the phone lines in the canyon had already been torn out. The canyon has flooded since. In September 2013, a broader Front Range flood killed 10 people and damaged 26,000 homes. Number 10 is the vacation postcard that turns, in an evening, into a shoot. Number 9, Vermont. Now the list moves somewhere no one puts on a flood map. Vermont is maple syrup and covered bridges and gentle green mountains, the American idea of a safe, quiet place. But those same green mountains do exactly what mountains do. They wring the water out of storms and pour it into the narrow valleys where every one of Vermont's towns happens to sit. Vermont also carries a hidden liability under all that scenery. The average age of the state's dams is around 89 years. Many were built generations ago, long before modern engineering standards and long before the heavier, more frequent downpours the region now gets. They were not designed for the rain that is falling on them today. In July 2023, historic flooding tested them all at once. State inspectors found that 57 dams were overtopped, 50 sustained notable damage, and 5 failed outright. The capital, Montpelier, went underwater. The people who move to Vermont for a slower, safer life are often the least prepared for how fast a mountain stream can rise, and how much aging infrastructure sits quietly upstream. Number 9 is the postcard state, whose danger is stored behind century-old walls nobody thinks about. Number 8, West Virginia. West Virginia is the steepest state in the East, and steep is the entire problem. Rain that falls on the ridgelines has only one direction to go and only one place to gather, the hollows and the narrow creek bottoms, where, because there is no flat ground anywhere else, people have always had to build their homes. On June 23, 2016, storms trained over the same ground for hours and dropped up to 10 inches of rain in about 12 hours, an event the National Weather Service called a 1-in-1,000-year rainfall. Creeks that were normally ankle-deep became torrents. In one town, floodwaters shoved a burning house down a creek. 23 people died. It ranked among the deadliest floods in state history. And West Virginia's relationship with flooding runs deep and grim. A USGS analysis found that every single county in the state had been declared a federal flood disaster area at least once since 1967, many of them 10 times over. The state also carries the ghost of Buffalo Creek. In 1972, a coal slurry dam gave way and sent 132 million gallons of black water through a string of narrow mining towns, killing 125 people in minutes. West Virginia has never had enough flat ground to be safe from its own water. Number 8 is the state where the land itself aims the flood straight at the front door. Number 7, Kentucky. Just to the west, eastern Kentucky sits in the same Appalachian trap, and in recent years, it has become one of the clearest pictures in America of what without warning really means. The hollows here are deep and rugged, threaded by creeks with names like Troublesome, And in many communities, there is exactly one road in and out, a road that runs right alongside the water. In late July 2022, a stalled front produced training thunderstorms, the same storm cell passing over the same ground again and again, dropping rain at rates of up to 4 inches an hour. Over 5 days, some areas received 14 inches. The North Fork of the Kentucky River rose roughly 18 feet in 10 hours and shattered records. Entire homes were swept off their foundations in the dark. 45 people died, the deadliest natural disaster to hit eastern Kentucky in more than 80 years, and rescuers pulled well over 1,000 people out by boat and helicopter. And it did not stop there. The town of Hazard, gutted in 2022, flooded catastrophically again in February 2025. Some residents were still rebuilding from the first disaster when the second one arrived. Number 7 is the place where the flood now comes so often that once in a lifetime has stopped meaning anything. Number 6, Tennessee. We're at the halfway point. If you're still with me, you're clearly someone who wants to actually understand this, not just be scared by it. So if you haven't yet, this is the moment to subscribe, because the states from here up are the ones where the scale stops being local and starts being historic. Tennessee makes a point that a lot of Americans get wrong. You do not need a coastline, a hurricane, or a famous river to be killed by a flood. You just need the sky to open up over the wrong hill. On August 21st, 2021, a nearly stationary band of storms stalled over Humphreys County in Middle Tennessee. A gauge in the tiny community of McEwen recorded 20.73 inches of rain in 24 hours, a new state record, obliterating the old one by 7 inches. Nearby, the small town of Waverly took around 17 inches. Trace Creek, an ordinary creek most people never gave a thought, rose fast enough to tear apart entire apartment buildings. 20 people drowned. This was inland, hours from any coast, in a place with no reputation for catastrophe. And it was the second major flood to hit the state that same year. Tennessee's danger is precisely that it doesn't fit the mental picture. No ocean, no warning, just a creek that most residents had crossed 1,000 times. Number 6 is the reminder that flat, landlocked, ordinary ground drowns people too. Number 5, North Carolina. For years, western North Carolina and the southern Appalachians were quietly sold as one of America's climate refuges, high, cool, inland, far from the hurricanes that batter the coast. People moved to the mountains around Asheville specifically to get away from disaster. Then, in late September 2024, Hurricane Helene proved how wrong that map was. Helene came ashore in Florida but saved its worst for the mountains. It stalled over the southern Appalachians and dropped staggering amounts of rain on terrain already soaked by an earlier storm, the exact steep, funneling geography we have seen all through this list, now hit with a tropical system's worth of water. Rivers and creeks in the North Carolina highlands rose to levels not seen in a century, scouring whole communities off the map. In North Carolina alone, Helene was responsible for more than 100 deaths. The cruelty of it was the sense of safety. These were the people who had chosen the mountains because the mountains felt protected. The flood found them anyway, in the one region the whole country had agreed was out of reach. Number 5 is the safe haven that turned out to be a funnel. Number 4, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania holds the darkest chapter in the entire American history of flooding, and the reason it sits this high is that the conditions that caused it have not gone away. They have aged. On May 31st, 1889, after days of heavy rain, the poorly maintained South Fork Dam failed above the steel town of Johnstown. A wall of water as high as 40 feet briefly moving with a flow rate rivaling the Mississippi River, ground down the narrow valley at up to 40 miles an hour, gathering houses, trees, and rail cars into a single grinding mass. It killed 2,209 people. It remains the deadliest dam failure disaster in United States history, and the people of Johnstown had almost no warning. The telegraph lines were already down. Here is why that is not just history. The dam that failed was old, neglected, and holding back far more danger than anyone downstream understood. And that description fits thousands of American dams today. The average U.S. dam is now 64 years old. Pennsylvania, specifically, carries the second largest flood insurance protection gap of any state in the country, meaning enormous exposure to losses that almost nobody is insured against. The Johnstown flood was called an act of God. A modern analysis called it an accident waiting to happen. Number 4 is the state where the original American flood catastrophe is also a warning about the infrastructure still standing above us. Number 3, Missouri. Missouri has no coast, no hurricanes, and 2 of the largest rivers on the continent. The Mississippi and the Missouri meet just above St. Louis, which means the state sits at the drain of a watershed that collects rain and snowmelt from a huge slice of North America. When that system swells, a flooded river outside St. Louis can move on the order of 1.27 million gallons of water per second, swallowing highways and knocking out utilities. The Great Flood of 1993 put much of the region underwater for weeks. Roughly 700,000 Missourians live in high-risk areas. But Missouri carries a second, stranger threat that almost no one downstream thinks about. The boot heel of the state sits inside the New Madrid seismic zone, the most active earthquake region in the central United States. A major quake there, something the zone has produced before and will again, could rupture the levees that hold the Mississippi in its channel across a wide stretch of the Midwest and South, and do it in an instant, with no storm, no rain, and no warning at all. It would be a flood triggered by the ground itself. Number 3 is the landlocked state that sits at the bottom of a continent's plumbing, with a fault line running underneath the walls that hold the water back. Number 2, Texas. Texas leads the entire nation in flood deaths, and it isn't close. One analysis of the years 1959 to 2019 counted 1,069 flood deaths in Texas, and the next highest state, Louisiana, had 693. The dark heart of that statistic is a crescent of land curving from around Dallas, down past San Antonio, and out to the west, known to hydrologists as Flash Flood Alley. The geology is a machine built for disaster. The Balcones escarpment lifts moist Gulf air until it dumps torrential rain, and beneath that rain lies thin soil over hard karst limestone that absorbs almost nothing. Water doesn't soak in. It runs off instantly, races down steep slopes from every direction, and converges in narrow river valleys as a surge. The world saw exactly what that produces on July 4th, 2025. Storms stalled over the hill country, and the Guadalupe River rose about 26 feet in 45 minutes near the community of Hunt. In Kerrville, the river climbed roughly 35 feet. It came in the pre-dawn dark, while people slept in cabins and RV parks and summer camps along a river that had been calm and shallow the night before. More than 130 people were killed, most of them in Kerr County, including children at a camp on the water's edge. The county had discussed a flood warning siren system for years and never built it. Number 2 is the deadliest flood ground in America, where the beauty of the river is the exact thing that kills. Number 1, California. And the #1 state where the next mega flood could happen without warning is the one that has spent the last decade worried about drought. California is where the single largest uncounted flood catastrophe in America is waiting, and scientists can tell you it is waiting because it has happened over and over again. In the winter of 1861 to 1862, a relentless parade of storms, what we now call atmospheric rivers, corridors of tropical moisture aimed at the coast, battered California for weeks. The Central Valley turned into an inland sea, roughly 300 miles long and more than 20 miles wide. Downtown Sacramento sat under 10 feet of water, and the state government fled to San Francisco. Sediment records show storms even larger than that one have struck California repeatedly over the past 2,000 years. The U.S. Geological Survey modeled a modern repeat and named it the ARK storm, for an atmospheric river of once-in-a-thousand-year intensity. Their finding, produced by 117 scientists and engineers, is staggering. Such a storm could flood about a quarter of all buildings in the state, breach roughly 50 levees, force the evacuation of 1.5 million people, inundate an area home to millions, and cause on the order of $725 billion to nearly $1 trillion in damage, several times the cost of Hurricane Katrina. And here is the part that puts it at #1. California's flood system is engineered to handle roughly 100 to 200-year events. The ARK storm is a 500 to 1,000-year event. The U.S. Geological Survey states it plainly: the state's flood protection is not designed for the storm that history guarantees will eventually come. The last one was more than 160 years ago. The clock has been running the entire time. #1 is the drought state sitting on top of the largest overdue flood in America, one that would arrive not in an afternoon, but over weeks, and one the maps most people rely on still do not account for. So here is what this list is really about. Not fear. Fear is easy, and it's gone by the next sunny weekend. It's about the gap between what water looks like and what water is. Every state on this list is beautiful. The canyon in Arizona, the mountains in North Carolina, the lazy green river in the Texas Hill Country. People are drawn to exactly the places that are the most dangerous, because moving water carves the most beautiful ground, and then it comes back for it. The flood doesn't announce itself the way we've trained ourselves to expect. It doesn't darken the sky over your head. It falls somewhere you can't see, on ground someone decided long ago was far enough away, and it travels. It finds the low places. It has more patience than we do, and a much longer memory. The dry wash is still dry. The old dam is still holding. The river is still at knee height, slow and clear and completely silent about what it's capable of. And somewhere upstream, right now, on ground none of us are looking at, it's already starting to rain.